Number 1. The Book of Soyga. There was one man in Elizabethan England who claimed he could speak with angels. His name was John Dee, born in 1527, a mathematician, an astrologer, and the private advisor to Queen Elizabeth I. Dee owned the largest library in England, and there was one book on his shelves he could not read. Its title was strange: Aldaraya, Sive Soyga Vocor. The word Soyga is a trick. Spell it backwards and adjust it, and you get agios, the Greek word for holy. So the book's own name hides a secret in plain sight. That was a warning of what waited inside. In March of 1582, Dee recorded a conversation with the angel Uriel. He asked about this very book. The angel told him the text had been revealed to Adam in the Garden of Eden, and that no living human could interpret it. Only the archangel Michael could read it. Imagine being the smartest occultist in the kingdom and being told the book on your desk is beyond you. After Dee died, the book vanished. For centuries, it was presumed lost. Then, in 1994, the scholar Deborah Harkness tracked down not one, but two surviving copies, one in the British Library and one in the Bodleian at Oxford. The mystery was back. Most of the book is astrology, angel lore, and pseudo-biblical history. But the final section is what terrified people. It contains 36 enormous tables. Each table is a grid, 36 squares wide and 36 squares tall, packed with letters. Together, they hold more than 40,000 letters, and no one could find any meaning in them. For 400 years, they resisted. Then, in 1998, a mathematician named Jim Reeds solved them. He discovered the tables were generated by a rule. You start with a keyword in the top row. Then, each letter below is produced by shifting the letter above it using a fixed set of 6 code numbers. Think of it like a spreadsheet formula copied down a column. Every cell depends on the one above. Reeds even found copying mistakes in the grids. Small errors that prove a human scribe made them. Not an angel, a person. The book belongs to an old lineage. It blends the tradition of the Sefer Raziel, the book of the angel Raziel, said to have been given to Adam, with medieval astrological magic. Its cipher works through a 23-letter Latin alphabet, wrapping around like a wheel, and its reputation reached far beyond Dee. The scholar Deborah Harkness placed it at the very center of his angelic project in her 1999 book on his conversations with angels. The writer Umberto Eco later pointed to Soyga as a real example of something we usually only meet in fiction, a book that genuinely cannot be read. There are 3 ways to read this. Dee believed it was genuine divine revelation. Mainstream scholars see a medieval compilation of older magical material, and a few argue it was a deliberate, unsolvable puzzle, meant to look like forbidden wisdom. Here's the part that keeps it dangerous, even now. The tables are solved, the algorithm is known, and they still spell nothing. Whatever message was supposed to be hidden inside, if any, remains locked. A book you cannot read is frightening, but imagine a book you can read that openly promises to summon something. Number 2. The Grand Grimoire. Some books whisper their power. This one advertises it. The Grand Grimoire, also called Le Dragon Rouge, the Red Dragon, has spent 2 centuries branding itself as the single most dangerous book of black magic ever printed. Almost everything on its cover is a lie designed to scare you. Many editions carry the date 1522 to look ancient and authoritative. In reality, scholars date the text to the late 1700s or early 1800s. The listed author, Antonio Venetiana del Rabina, never existed. He is a fiction, borrowed from the older tradition of crediting magic books to Solomon. The book comes in 2 halves. The first gives instructions for summoning a spirit. The second, called the Sanctum Regnum, explains how to command it once it appears. And the spirit it aims at is a specific one, Lucifuge Rofacal, described as the demon who controls all the wealth of the world on Lucifer's behalf. To reach him, the magician needs the blasting rod. The book instructs you to cut a wand from a wild hazel at the exact moment of dawn, before the sun clears the horizon. With that rod, the operator draws a circle, calls the demon, and then, crucially, negotiates. The heart of the ritual is a bargain. You want treasure. The demon wants your soul. The whole drama is talking him into the first without surrendering the second. Much of this is lifted from an earlier book, the Grimorium Verum, and from the wider Solomonic tradition. The historian Owen Davies, who wrote the definitive history of magic books, traced how the Grand Grimoire spread. It was printed cheaply in the flimsy chapbooks that peddlers sold across the French countryside. This was not an elite manuscript locked in a tower. It was mass-market horror, sold to ordinary people. That's exactly why it frightened authorities. Most grimoires claimed divine authority to make their magic respectable. The Grand Grimoire skipped the pretense and put a demonic pact right on the table. Some editions even claimed the one true original was hidden inside the Vatican, a piece of pure marketing that made the book feel more forbidden. Even the demon's name is a piece of theater. Lucifuge Rofocal appears to be a constructed coinage, built from the Latin lutifugus, meaning light fleeing, the thing that runs from the light. The book was pirated across languages, printed in Italian as Il Dragon Rosso, the Red Dragon, and spread wherever cheap paper could carry it. Folk belief added its own layer of dread. In some communities, people held that merely owning the book was enough to draw demonic attention to your house, whether or not you ever dared to open it. 3 readings survive. Some treat it as a genuine occult manual. Others see a commercial sensation, engineered to sell by promising danger. And in the Caribbean, the Grand Grimoire took on a second life, absorbed into folk belief as a book of ultimate power. This book was cheap and everywhere. The next one was rare, expensive, and studied by kings. Number 3. Picatrix. Long before Europe feared magic books, the Islamic world produced one of the most sophisticated ever written. Its Arabic title is Gayat al-Hakim, the goal of the sage. Europe came to know it as Picatrix. It was compiled around the year 1000, most likely between 1000 and 1050. For centuries, it was credited to the astronomer al-Madridi, but modern scholars reject that. The real author is unknown. What is not in doubt is the scale. Picatrix runs to roughly 400 pages across 4 books, and it is nothing less than a complete system of astral magic. Its journey west came through a king. Around 1256, under Alfonso X of Castile, known as Alfonso the Wise, the book was translated into Castilian, and from there into Latin. Even the name Picatrix is a garbled echo of the original, mangled in translation. The core idea is breathtaking. Picatrix teaches that every planet and star pours out a kind of power, a spiritus. If you build the right object, a talisman, at the exact astrological moment, using the right metal, color, and incense, you can capture that celestial power and put it to work. It even describes a legendary city called Adasentin, ruled entirely by talismanic magic. The book draws on deep roots: the star worship of the Iranian Sabians, Hermetic philosophy, Neoplatonism, and older Indian and Persian sources. The scholar Frances Yates, in her landmark study of the Hermetic tradition, showed how Picatrix carried astral magic into the Renaissance. The philosopher Marsilio Ficino, in 1489, wrote his own gentler version of this magic, carefully softened for Christian readers. The definitive modern edition of the Latin Picatrix came from the historian David Pingree at the Warburg Institute. So why was it dangerous? Because drawing down the spirit of a planet looked to Christian eyes exactly like idolatry, or worse, like summoning demons in disguise. Some of its rituals call for blood, animal parts, and invocations that horrified church authorities. The mechanics are worth dwelling on, because they show how seriously this was taken. To capture a planet's power, the operator matched it to the correct metal, the correct color, the correct incense burned at the correct planetary hour, then shaped an image at the astrologically perfect moment. The theory held that all of these things were secretly linked, and that the right combination would pull an influence down from the sky and lock it into an object. What makes Picatrix so remarkable to historians is that it stitched together Islamic, Jewish, and Christian magical ideas into a single working system, a rare technical bridge between three worlds that were often at war. The debate has three sides. Medieval defenders saw a legitimate science of cosmic sympathy, the idea that everything in the universe is connected. The church saw demon magic wearing a scientific mask, and modern historians read it as a fascinating window into how people once believed the cosmos actually worked. Picatrix pulled its power down from the stars. The next book on our list called on something far lower, and it was written by the very people who condemned it. Number 4. The Munich Manual of Demonic Magic. In the Bavarian State Library in Munich sits a small, unremarkable manuscript with the shelf mark CLM 849. It looks like nothing. It is one of the most shocking documents to survive the Middle Ages. For a long time, no one paid it much attention. Then the historian Richard Kiefer studied it, and in 1997 published it under a fitting title, Forbidden Rites. What he found inside was a working manual of necromancy, real instructions for conjuring and commanding demons. The rituals are astonishingly specific. There are operations to summon spirits, to force one person to love or hate another, and to create illusions. One promises to conjure a phantom castle, another a troop of phantom horses. These are not vague spells. They are step-by-step procedures, complete with circles, offerings, and the names of demons to call. And here's the detail that changed how historians see the medieval church. Kiefer argued the author was almost certainly a cleric. Only an educated churchman would have the Latin and the ritual training these rites demand. This is the evidence for what scholars now call the clerical underworld, priests and monks secretly practicing the very magic they preached against. The manual borrows the structure of the Mass itself. It inverts sacred forms into tools for conjuration. The operator must fast, confess, and purify himself, a dark mirror of Christian devotion, turned toward summoning spirits. Many of the demons named overlap with the Solomonic tradition, and with another text, the Ars Notoria. The very survival of this book is remarkable. Manuals like this were routinely thrown into the fire, which is why so few working copies exist. To own one was to risk your soul in the eyes of the church, and to risk a charge of heresy or witchcraft in the eyes of the law. The motives behind the magic were often surprisingly ordinary. Alongside the phantom castles and compelled love, many operations aimed at finding buried treasure or gaining secret knowledge, the same practical hopes that drove most magic books. The manual's diagrams of circles and characters are among the most detailed to survive from the period, precise enough that scholars can reconstruct exactly how an operator was meant to stand, speak, and act. And it sits at a crucial hinge in history, the point where learned necromancy, practiced quietly by clerics, began to feed the terrifying image of the diabolical witch that inquisitors would soon hunt across Europe. There are three ways to understand it. Kiefer saw genuine underground practice. Some suggest the compiler copied it out of scholarly curiosity, and others see in it the seed of the diabolical witch that inquisitors would soon hunt across Europe. This was a book kept secret by a nervous priest. The next was kept secret by a sworn oath and by fire. Number 5. The Sworn Book of Honorius. Its Latin name is Liber Juratus Honori, the Sworn Book of Honorius, and it comes with one of the most dramatic origin stories in the history of magic. The surviving copies date from the 1300s through the 1500s, preserved in manuscripts in the British Library. The book credits itself to Honorius of Thebes, a legendary master magician, and its prologue tells a tale. It claims that 89 masters of magic, gathered from Naples, Athens, and Toledo, met in secret because the church was trying to wipe out their art forever. To save it, they distilled all of magic into a single book. They made only a handful of copies, and each keeper swore a binding oath to guard it in total secrecy and to pass it to no more than a few worthy successors, or destroy it at death. That oath is why it is called the Sworn Book. At its center is a famous design, the Sigillum Dei, the seal of God, an intricate circular emblem. If that sounds familiar, it should. John Dee adopted a version of this exact seal for the table he used to contact angels, centuries later. The book makes an astonishing promise. Through its rituals, the operator can achieve the beatific vision, to see God directly, face to face. To the church, that was outrageous, a shortcut to the divine that bypassed the entire institution. The book also teaches how to command angels, spirits, and demons, and to gain knowledge, wealth, and power over the weather. The critical modern edition came from the scholar Gösta Hedegaard, and researchers like Robert Mathieson and Jan Veenstra have studied its strange theology. What makes it so dangerous is the fusion at its heart. It pairs intense, sincere Christian devotion with explicit spirit conjuration, holiness and sorcery braided together. The book is enormous in ambition. Across roughly 90 chapters, depending on the manuscript, it lays out angelic names, planetary hours, and elaborate rites of purification. It demands that the operator be a baptized Christian in a state of grace, freshly confessed and pure, before daring any of it. Some copies even give instructions for consecrating the book itself, treating the physical object as a holy relic. That is the scandal in miniature. A text that insists on sainthood as the price of admission, then turns that sanctity toward commanding demons. 3 interpretations compete. Some read it as sincere Christian theurgy, a genuine attempt to reach God. The church read it as heretical presumption, and some historians see the whole persecution story as self-mythologizing propaganda, designed to make the book feel precious and forbidden. This book claimed the state was hunting it. The next book truly was a state secret, guarded by Rome itself. Number 6. The Sibylline Books. Not every dangerous book is about demons. Some are about the future. The Sibylline Books were Rome's most closely guarded prophetic texts, a collection of oracles written in Greek verse. They were not a single volume, but a set of scrolls, and the Roman state would eventually kill to protect them. Their origin is legend. The story, told by writers like Dionysius of Halicarnassus, says the Cumaean Sibyl, a prophetess, came to King Tarquin the Proud in the late 500s BC, offering 9 books of prophecy at a steep price. He refused. So she burned 3 and offered the remaining 6 at the same price. He refused again. She burned 3 more and offered the last 3, still at the original price of all 9. This time, unnerved, he paid. Those scrolls were sealed in a stone chest and placed beneath the temple of Jupiter, the supreme god, on the Capitoline Hill. They could be consulted only by a decree of the Senate, and only in a genuine crisis, plague, disaster, or terrifying omens. To read them without authorization was a capital crime. A special priesthood guarded them, growing over time from 2 men to 10, and finally to 15. When consulted, the books did not predict the future so much as prescribe a remedy. Build this temple, hold these games, bring this foreign god to Rome. In 204 BC, on their advice, Rome imported the worship of the goddess Cybele. Then came fire. In 83 BC, the temple of Jupiter burned, and the original books were destroyed. Rome was so shaken that it sent envoys across the entire Mediterranean to gather replacement Sibylline verses. Later, around 12 BC, the Emperor Augustus moved the reconstituted collection to the Temple of Apollo on the Palatine. And he did something telling. he ordered some 2,000 unofficial prophetic texts burned, keeping only the verses he approved. That is state censorship, plain and clear. The end came around the year 405, when the general Stilicho is said to have ordered the books burned for good. The poet Rutilius Nematianus condemned the act as a crime against Rome itself. The secrecy was almost total. The guardian priesthood eventually bore the full title of the 15 men appointed for sacred duties, and they alone had access. Even most Roman senators, the men who ran the empire, never laid eyes on the actual text. The standard modern study of these oracles by the scholar H.W. Park stresses just how tightly the state controlled every glimpse of them, because a single verse, read aloud at the right moment, could steer the whole republic. Why so dangerous? Because controlled prophecy is political power. The right verse could justify a war or topple a policy. Interpretations vary. A genuine oracle archive, a tool of senatorial control, or an evolving collection of propaganda. One thing is certain: do not confuse these lost Roman books with the surviving Jewish and Christian Sibylline oracles, which are a completely separate text. That book was banned for its power to move a state. The next was banned for its power to move the human heart. Number 7. Ovid's Art of Love. Sometimes the most dangerous thing a book can do is embarrass the powerful. Around the year 1 BC, the Roman poet Ovid published the Ars Amatoria, the Art of Love, 3 books of witty, elegant verse. On the surface, it is a how-to guide for seduction, advice for men on winning women, and for women on managing men. It was brilliant, popular, and perfectly timed to enrage the most powerful man in the world. The Emperor Augustus had spent years pushing moral reform. His law, the Lex Julia of 18 BC, made adultery a crime. And here was Rome's most celebrated poet publishing what read like a cheerful instruction manual for exactly the behavior the emperor had outlawed. For years, Augustus tolerated it. Then, in the year 8, he struck. Ovid was banished to Tomis, a bleak outpost on the edge of the Black Sea in what is now Romania. Ovid himself gave a famous, cryptic explanation for his downfall. He blamed, in his words, a poem and a mistake, carmen et error. The poem, scholars agree, was the art of love. The mistake was some personal offense he never named, possibly something he witnessed involving the imperial family. Augustus did not stop at exile. He ordered Ovid's books removed from the 3 great public libraries of Rome. This is one of history's earliest clear cases of the state banning an author and pulling his works from the shelves. Ovid spent the last decade of his life in exile, writing sorrowful poems, the Tristia and the Letters from the Black Sea, begging to come home. The recall never came. He died at Tomis around the year 17 or 18, far from the city he loved. The poem survived only because private copies kept circulating despite the ban, and its trouble did not end with Rome. Centuries later, Christian moralists condemned it. In 1497, the Friar Savonarola's bonfire of the Vanities in Florence targeted exactly this kind of classical erotic verse. Even into the 20th century, editions were restricted by censors. Part of what made the poem so provocative was its 3rd book, addressed to women. It coached them on cosmetics, on manners, on how to handle several admirers at once. Frank advice that pushed hard against the modest ideal Augustus was trying to enforce. That frankness is exactly what kept censors nervous for centuries. As late as the early 1900s, customs officials in the United States were still restricting editions of a poem written nearly 2,000 years earlier. The debate endures. Was Ovid destroyed by the poem, or by the mysterious error, with the book merely a convenient excuse for a political exile? Either way, his fate warned every Roman writer, where the emperor's patience ended. This book was condemned for immorality. The next was condemned even by the authorities who used it to kill. Number 8. The Malleus Maleficarum. Some books are dangerous because of what they summon. This one was dangerous because of what it unleashed on real people. The Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches, was first printed in the German city of Speyer around 1486. It became the most notorious witch-hunting manual in history. Its main author was Heinrich Kramer, a Dominican inquisitor. A second friar, Jacob Sprenger, was long listed as co-author, though modern scholars now doubt his real involvement. Kramer wrote the book after a humiliation. In 1485, he had tried to run a witch trial in Innsbruck, and the local bishop threw him out, disgusted by his methods. The Malleus was in part his revenge. To armor himself with authority, Kramer had obtained a papal bull from Pope Innocent VIII in 1484, and he printed it right at the front of the book, as if the Pope endorsed everything that followed. The book has 3 parts. The first argues that witchcraft is real and that denying it is heresy. The second describes how witches supposedly operate. The third lays out how to prosecute, torture, and execute them. It is savagely misogynistic, arguing that women are far more prone to witchcraft because of weaker faith and greater carnality. It explicitly endorses torture to extract confessions, and death for the convicted. Here's the twist. The Church did not embrace it. The theology faculty of the University of Cologne condemned the book for procedures that were unethical and illegal. Kramer, it appears, may have forged or misrepresented their endorsement anyway. By 1490, the Church had effectively condemned the Malleus as inconsistent with Catholic teaching, and yet it did not matter. The printing press had changed the rules. Between 1486 and 1669, somewhere around 28 to 30 editions rolled off the presses. The book became a practical handbook during the Great Witch Trials, which killed tens of thousands of people across early modern Europe. The modern scholarly edition by Christopher Mackay lets us read the whole Grimm system in full. The book did more than describe witches. It helped invent the modern idea of one. By fusing scholarly theology, canon law, and village folklore, it hardened the stereotype of the witch who signs a pact with the devil and flies to a midnight Sabbath. And it reshaped the courtroom, encouraging judges to rely on anonymous denunciation and on torture, tilting every trial toward a confession. Today, the Malleus is studied as a landmark in 3 overlapping histories: the history of misogyny, the history of law, and the history of moral panic. So how do we explain it? Some see sincere, if monstrous, inquisitorial belief. Others see one zealot's personal vendetta amplified into policy, and many see a moral panic that print made unstoppable, a banned book that authority could not recall once it was loose in the world. The Malleus was banned and killed anyway. Our last book was banned for what it claimed to summon, and it became the ancestor of them all. Number 9. The Key of Solomon. If the grimoires of Europe had a founding text, it is this one. The Clavicula Salomonis, the Key of Solomon, is the backbone of the entire Solomonic magical tradition, and the Church named it outright as forbidden. Like so many magic books, it hides behind a great name. It claims to be the work of King Solomon, drawing on his biblical reputation for wisdom and for commanding spirits. The surviving manuscripts mostly date from the 1400s through the 1700s, but the tradition reaches far deeper. A Greek text from the Byzantine world, the Hygromanteia, or Magical Treatise of Solomon, is one of its major ancestors. The book is essentially a workshop manual for ritual magic. It explains how to make pentacles, engraved talismans, and seals tied to the planets. It details the tools, the robes, the consecrations, and the strict rounds of fasting, purification, and prayer required before any spirit is summoned. It should not be confused with the Lesser Key of Solomon, a later 17th century book whose famous section, the Ars Goetia, catalogs 72 demons. The church took direct aim at it. The Key of Solomon was placed on the Index of Forbidden Books. In 1559, Pope Paul IV's index specifically banned works of divination and Solomonic magic. To the Inquisition, simply owning a copy was evidence of forbidden practice. The book crossed cultures. A Hebrew version, the Maftea Shlomo, was published by the scholar Hermann Gollancz in 1914. In 1889, the occultist Samuel MacGregor Mathers translated an influential English edition from manuscripts in the British Library, and through him the book entered the modern occult revival of groups like the Golden Dawn. The pinnacles are organized by planet, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, the Sun, Venus, Mercury, and the Moon, each with its own powers. And this is the paradox at the core of the Church's fear. The Key of Solomon insists on Judeo-Christian piety. It commands spirits by divine names rather than worshiping them. But to the Church, summoning any spirit at all, even one you claim to command, meant trafficking with demons. The method is what scholars call the urgic and coercive at once. The magician does not beg or worship the spirit. He commands it, using the names of God as instruments of control, and the book adapted wherever it traveled, circulating in Latin, Italian, French, and Hebrew, absorbing the flavor of each local magical culture it passed through. That adaptability is exactly why it became the root of the whole European grimoire tradition, copied, translated, and revived again and again. The interpretation split three ways: pious theurgy, demonic sorcery, or, as modern scholars like Owen Davies and Joseph Peterson treat it, the central cultural artifact for understanding how holy magic became forbidden magic. 9 books. One recurring fear. Step back from the 9, and a single pattern comes into focus. In every case, the real threat was the same. These books offered a private line to power that bypassed the sanctioned channels, the church, the state, or God himself. The Key of Solomon and the sworn Book of Honorius promised direct access to spirits, and even to the divine, without priests. Picatrix promised the power of the planets, without the cosmos God had ordered. The Sibylline Books promised the future, controlled by whoever read them. The recurring accusation, spoken or unspoken, was presumption, ordinary mortals reaching past their allotted place. Notice how different the dangers were, yet how similar the fear. Ovid's crime was moral, mocking the state's values. The grimoire's crime was spiritual, consorting with the unseen. The Malleus was dangerous in a third way entirely, as a procedure, a method for turning suspicion into execution. And the Sibylline Books were dangerous as pure information, prophecy that could justify a war. There is another way these books rhyme with one another. Nearly all of them borrow a great name to shield themselves. Solomon, Honorius, Adam and Eden, an ancient sage, the Cumean Sibyl. Attaching a text to a legendary authority did two things at once. It lent the magic credibility, and it put a comfortable distance between the living author and the dangerous words. If the book was written by Solomon 1,000 years ago, no one alive could be blamed for it. There is one more thread. In almost every case, the true danger was that the knowledge was written down and copyable. A single practitioner can be silenced. A book cannot. It spreads, hides, and resurfaces. And once the printing press arrived, the old tools of suppression began to fail completely. Before printing, banning a book meant something physical. Most often, it meant fire. Burning a book was both a practical act and a symbol, a public demonstration that certain knowledge would not be permitted to exist. But fire was not the only tool. Sometimes the goal was not destruction, but control. The Sibylline Books were not burned by Rome. They were locked in a stone chest, readable only by a handful of priests, only by order of the Senate. The sworn Book of Honorius policed itself through a binding oath. its keepers pledged to secrecy and to destroy their copies at death. Later, the Church systematized the whole practice. The Index of Forbidden Books, formalized in 1559, turned banning into an institution, a standing list of what the faithful could not read. Below that, there was confiscation and expurgation, quietly cutting the offending passages, and simple removal, as when Augustus pulled Ovid's works from Rome's libraries. The trouble is that suppression often backfired. Forbidden books gained a dark glamour. Telling people a text was too dangerous to read was, for many, an irresistible invitation, and translation offered a constant loophole. Picatrix slipped from Arabic into Castilian into Latin, crossing every border a censor tried to hold. Given all that effort to erase them, how do we still have these books at all? The answer is that copying outran destruction. For every manuscript burned, handwritten copies survived in private hands, hidden, mislabeled, or quietly shelved in monastic and royal libraries where no inquisitor thought to look. Then, centuries later, came the rescuers, the scholars. Samuel MacGregor Mathers and Herman Gollantz recovered versions of the Key of Solomon. David Pingree reconstructed Picatrix. Richard Kiefer decoded the Munich Manual. Deborah Harkness found the lost copies of Soyga, and Jim Reeds cracked its tables. Work that inquisitors would have called heresy is now careful academic scholarship. The occult revival helped too. 19th century groups like the Golden Dawn hunted down grimoires and put them back into circulation. And there is a deep irony at the center of all this. Condemnation preserved these books. Being banned made them famous, and being famous kept them alive. The pattern of recovery tells its own story. These texts were saved not by believers, but by the careful, patient work of librarians, cryptographers, and historians, people whose only spell was scholarship. A book once hunted as an instrument of the devil now sits under glass in a national library, its every page photographed and studied. The very institutions that once burned such works became the ones that preserved them. Yet survival is a slippery word. Sometimes a text endures, while its meaning does not. The Book of Soyga exists, its cipher is solved, and its message is still gone. The pages survived. The secret did not. For all we have learned, these books still guard real mysteries. The tables of Soyga are the clearest example. We know exactly how they were built, and yet they yield no readable message. Was something encoded and lost? Was there ever a message at all? No one can say. Other questions stay open. We will never know how much of the Sibylline verses vanished in the flames, or what Rome truly lost. We do not know for certain what Ovid's mysterious error was, the offense that may have mattered more than his poem. We have no idea how many working manuals, like the Munich Codex, were burned and never recovered, leaving our picture of medieval magic full of gaps. And the true authorship and dates of the Grand Grimoire and of Picatrix remain debated. The work is not finished. Manuscripts still surface in library collections. Digital cataloging is revealing texts that sat unread for centuries. Some of these books may still have secrets to give up, and there is a quieter mystery underneath all of them. We can count the books that survived. We cannot count the ones that did not. For every grimoire, oracle, or forbidden poem that reached us, an unknown number were burned so thoroughly that not even a title remains. The history of dangerous books is, in part, a history of silence, of the works we will never know were written, because someone made sure they would not last. Every age draws a line around the knowledge it decides is too dangerous to hold. What changes is where the line falls. For Rome, it was prophecy. For Augustus, it was a poem about love. For the medieval church, it was a private path to God, or a whispered pact with something darker. The subject shifts, but the impulse does not, and running against that impulse is its opposite, just as old, the human hunger to know the forbidden thing anyway, to open the sealed chest, to copy the sworn book, to read the page you were told to burn. What is most striking, looking back across all 9, is how completely the censors failed. The empires that guarded these texts are gone. The inquisitors are dust. And the books, the ones they burned, banned, and sealed away, are still here, sitting in libraries, translated, studied, and read. They outlived the powers that tried to erase them. So the next time you hear that a book is too dangerous to read, remember these 9. The danger was never really in the pages. It was in what those pages might let an ordinary person see, or know, or do. And that is a door authority has never quite managed to close.